Okay, hello, welcome back. I totally want to do this in Assassin's Creed Liberation, but unfortunately that's on the computer and due entirely, and I mean entirely, to operator error, not equipment error. I haven't been able to get it to record very well. I'll eventually get it right, but until then, I'm doing this. I put Evie in the Avaline outfit, so I'm hoping that'll be close enough. So, what I wanted to discuss here was this basically how good people become evil, how things that are evil just happen. You know, what causes it, what puts it in people's heads to, yeah, just how it happens, basically. This is, you know, relates to everything. It's you know, from how a person who's religious, you know, ends up living a life of sin, how a society, how what was unacceptable in society suddenly becomes acceptable. You know, it's from every concept, every idea like that is what we're going to explore. And the answer to that is quite simple, very very simple. There's just a simple formula of how it works, and it starts like this. It's first, excuse me. At first you tolerate, then you accept, then you embrace. That's the basic how the human beings go from one point to another. And the reason I was... Ooh, can I make that jump? Nope, not quite. The reason I was going to use liberation was because I was going to use slavery as an example of how a person would go from just being a normal person to being a person who believes it's okay to own slaves. And, you know, along the way, this is going to touch on basically all forms of bias, of that sort of thing, just because that's the nature of how this particular thing works. So, this will sound strange, I think, to most people, but all of these things starts out as a good intention, as a good thing. And in this case, it's benevolence. And I'm sure you're probably saying, okay, or kindness. I'm sure you're saying, this guy's nuts. How can slavery start out as kindness? And it's actually really interesting. I suggest you take a look at, you know, find, like, you know, people who have written about this, who have been in favor of slavery. Because it's really fascinating, especially when you realize it's not just an excuse. It's people honestly believe this way. But, so it starts out with this kind of belief that you're performing a kindness when you're biased or racist against someone. That a certain group of people are less competent, whether it's because they're savages, because they don't have the same society you have, because they don't have the same structures, you know, in any of those things. It starts out as a kindness, as these people really, honestly need our help. They, you know, we need to be able to come in and help them. They're not competent to do what they need to do. We need to come and help them. And, you know, well, as for owning them as slaves, well, we're really doing them a kindness. I mean, work is a virtue in and of itself, so we do put them to work, but we also, you know, they get good stuff out of it. They get food and clothing and shelter. You know, we give them all this stuff, you know, stuff that they, you know, they're just not competent enough to have earned this stuff on their own. We give it to them. We do expect labor in return. But that's ultimately good for them, too. And beating them, whipping them, well, you know, honestly, we've tried other forms. You know, sometimes they do things they're not supposed to, and we've tried other ways to let them know that, hey, this isn't okay to do. You know, and nothing ever really seems to get through to them. So, you know, except for beating and whipping them. So it's ultimately for their own good. It seems cruel, but it really is for their own good. And that's how a perfectly normal person, pretty much straightforward, goes to someone who becomes, you know, a racist enslaver. You know, you would think I'd be able to line launch from here. But regardless. And it's a very seductive process, because you start out ultimately doing good, and in the end of it you end up doing things that aren't so good. Looks like I'll have to go back over to here. Silly me. So it is a seductive and simple process like that, and it's really interesting if you look at different historical records, because people speak of this and speak exactly like it. It's ultimately for their good. I'm doing, you know, a public service. And it's not just a question of them justifying it, it's a question of them honestly believing this. It's really interesting. I've read some stuff written by Nazi sympathizers from the 1930s, and they expressed the same sort of view about races, cultures, people who were inferior to them. You know, not just Jewish people, but all sorts of people that they considered to be inferior were expressed the same way. It was, you know, it wasn't their fault that they were inferior, you know, and, you know, we should, if anything, feel sorry for these people who aren't as good for whatever reason. They, you know, it's not their fault. We should have sympathy and feel sorry for them. And it's very easy to start thinking that way and then move on to doing worse things and saying, well, it's completely justified because, you know, in this particular circumstances, this is how it is. So I think the argument a lot of people would probably make at this point is that, well, yeah, that couldn't happen nowadays. I'm gonna say it could happen anytime, any place, to anybody. And I've seen similar arguments being made nowadays in a wide variety of places and issues about it, being the argument, you know, coming out, starting with, you know, we need to help these people, and then having the implication that these people are not competent enough to help themselves. They can't function or do the things like that. So we need to help them. We need to show them the way. We need to tell them exactly how to live their lives. Like I said, I've seen that in a lot of things, and I would suggest, you know, going forward, somebody, you know, says, hey, we need to do this, we need to be kind to this is a kindness, this is what we need to do to help these people. You know, ask yourself, is this actually something that's helpful, or is it going to be, or am I actually presuming these people are are not competent, and you know, I think that's a good advice, a good way to look at just you know, to make sure that you're not actually falling into this little trap of, you know, essentially, you know, not saying that you would lead to slavery, but it would be racist. It would lead to being racist without you even realizing you're racist. So I would suggest you take a look at that. And I wanted to end this segment doing an actual real life example that happened to my mother, just to kind of illustrate how this is working and doing. So I'm sure most of you will remember a few years ago the huge debate over the legalization of gay marriage, and the debates that happened because of it. And so my mother was in a class at the time, and she was asked to do an article about, or to write a paper on it. You know, basically present both sides of the issue and then present her own conclusions. So after writing the paper, she suddenly, you know, said, you know, wait a second, you know, we have these friends, they're friends of the family, who are a lesbian couple. So, you know, let me check with them, see what they think about this, about the whole gay marriage thing. And so she called them up and asked them, okay, you know, explain, I'm doing this paper. What's your take on the whole gay marriage thing? And they very emphatically stated that they were against gay marriage. And the reason they were against it was because it painted them as victims. Now, put it in context, both women were successful women. They, you know, by all metrics of our society, they would be considered to be competent, successful women in their different professions. And yet, because of their sexual orientation, they were suddenly victims of society, and they found that to be a rather offensive portrayal of themselves. And you know, I can't help but agree, actually, because they're quite competent. And the fact that gay marriage was being pushed not on, you know, this, you know, not on the basis of equality or on the basis of just, hey, this is something we should do, but being pushed on the basis of these people have been victimized and they are victims of society, and the only way to correct that is to institute gay marriage, was, you know, just, it was not a good approach to it for them. And really, it ultimately, I believe, was, you know, this same sort of biases. This is actually kind of an evil approach, because it made them appear to be not competent, not good at anything they say. Or, they're just not good just simply because of their sexual orientation. Which, yeah, don't think that's a good way to proceed. Anyway, so that's a quick look at how, I'm going to do this cool balancing thing, of how unacceptable ideas become acceptable, how evil becomes a tolerable thing within a society. And to review, starts out good intentions, then we tolerate it because of the good intentions, then we accept it because, you know, of course, you have to keep going with the good intentions, and then we embrace it, which basically means, you know, of course we're doing the right thing, don't question it. Anyway, like and subscribe. I'm hoping in a little while to be able to get the Liberation thing working and doing a review on the game. I'm really enjoying it. At least thus far, I'm still early in the game, so we'll see. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. Bye.